Yo, what's up YouTube? What's up Facebook? What's up world? My Facebook is Matthew Harrison. Please feel free to add me, and you know, I'll obviously accept that, and I'm always looking for Facebook friends. And my Instagram is StormGrabber. Making a video today because I felt like it. The other night I recorded a video. It was my Hells Angels video part 2, and I wanted to re-record it because I feel like it deserves to have my full attention rather than be made on a rather than being made in a rush. I want to have the full you know, my full attention and my full, I don't want it to be rushed, basically. And it was rushed the other night. So instead of being called Going to Hell with the Hells Angels, this version is called Marriage Counseling with the Hells Angels. It's kind of a joke. So I gotta keep it real on this video. This video is there's no negativity and no hard feelings towards the Hells Angels in any sort of way, but I am going to be honest and real during the video just because I have to be. But so so this video starts off during COVID, and what happened was I was in Sacramento, California. I was married, and I wasn't legally married. I was married via the Bible, via my religion, with my wife. And what happened was COVID struck, and our marriage was already falling apart, and combined with the fact of COVID and just everything else, just her violence and all it, our marriage continued to fall apart. So I worked in a meat department, and there was one day when I got caught not wearing my mask. And the reason I had my mask down was because I was cleaning equipment, and the hot steamy foam made it hard for my glasses to see the equipment and the bandsaws and all those knives and stuff like that. So what happened was I had my mask down across my face, and some general manager or regional manager or something like that, he saw me with my mask down across my face, and he gave me a write-up, so I got in trouble. So my ex-wife, 10 years before, if you have any questions about this part of the story, just go to my Crazy Witching Stories #1, and you'll hear the story about my wife. But basically, she was supposedly molested and raped as a child, and eventually she became a prostitute, and also in many different forms. And in Sacramento and Northern California, the Hells Angels, they're not necessarily all like, you know, vest wearing motorcycle, but they have all different types of ranks and different. It's not like every Hells Angel affiliate is a person who has a vest and a patch. But throughout Sacramento and Redding, the spiritual world of the Hells Angels in in Redding and Sacramento is really it runs really deep. Like everything from people on the corners of the city begging to, they have prostitute. And like I said, it's not like everyone you see there is a motorcycle riding patchwear, but just the fact that their spiritual circles they're very heavy, all the way from the CHP to prostitution to people on the streets so the Hells Angels is a big thing over there in California in general. And when I say spiritual circles, I'm saying I'm not saying that they aren't Christians or they aren't saved, because I see Hells Angels affiliates at churches, but they just like there's spiritual circles of Mexican pride, just like there's spiritual circles of black witches or white witches or whatever. There's different spiritual circles, and I'm not gonna go out and tell everyone that they're Satanists or they're demon worshipers or whatever, but I'm not a witch, and to me, I'm a Christian, so I try to be affiliated with no spiritual circles. The only spiritual circle I want to be a part of is Jesus Christ and God. But, excuse me, I'm not stupid, and I know they exist. I know that there's different families of witchcraft. I know that there's different, and like I said, I'm not going to point the finger and say, oh, these people are Satanists, but there's different groups of people. There's different spiritual families. Whether they're good or evil is not up for me to judge in this moment, but be it so. Black witches, Crips, Bloods, Southsiders, Norteños, not only are they actual, groups of people in the world, they're also spiritual families too. Their familiar spirits communicate and so on and so forth. So what happened was I ended up, my wife, who was apparently ignorant to the fact that she grew up as a victim of Hells Angels prostitution rings, and she had stopped being a prostitute for 10 years. So she was not involved in any prostitution in any form when I met her, but she still was very heavily involved in these spiritual circles. So she had guys in trucks that would follow her around. She would drive close to truckers. She had construction workers that would show up around our apartment. And it's not like she personally knew these people or that she texted them or asked them to come to wherever she was. But just the fact of what she grew up around and who she was and what her spirituality was, they cling to each other. So it became a nuisance and a bother for me because I wanted privacy and I wanted Christianity and I wanted, a private relationship with me and my wife. Yet here I met this woman who I didn't understand witchcraft. And like I said, if that triggers your thoughts or your memories at all, just go back, and I'm gonna upload a video. It's called Crazy Witching Stories #1, and it explains my entire relationship with my wife. But basically, I was just this Christian guy who lived alone and had my own life before I met my wife, who was heavy into witchcraft and had scars and remnants of prostitution and the Hells Angels. And I didn't know how big of a Hells Angels influence was in my life before I met my wife, just because of where my parents were from and who my parents were and the fact that I'd been to prison. But later on, after meeting her and learning how these people communicate and act and what they come from and who they are, I learned that that's really such a thing. So what happened was I went on unemployment during COVID, which was a huge thing in California, when during COVID, and during that, what happened was my wife was suicidal, and she basically had the entire community, including the court systems and the police in that area, believing that I was domestically violent with her, when in fact she was entirely emotionally and physically abusive with me. And I was never violent with women before I met her, and the only type of violence that I ever had to use with her was restraining her and controlling her from destroying our house, and destroying and killing me. And she probably would have got away with murder, and she got away with attempted murder, GBI, and whatever else it would be, because she cut my bicep and my arm open into what I'm pretty sure was an arterial bleed, because it wouldn't stop bleeding and it was gushing blood out of my arm. And she cut our cat's head open, and she smashed me with a guitar, and she did all this other insane stuff. And the police and the court system still decided that I needed anger management, and that I needed to go to, different types of counseling and whatnot. And she got to go chit chat with the DA and text message all the different people. And it was a bunch of nonsense and just insanity. Even to the fact where at one point she I need to remember not to look at the camera when I'm driving. At one point, she even took some of my jewelry and pressed it into her face, creating a bruise. And the police in the area believed the picture she took of herself with this bruise of a cross on her face, and followed me to work. And but basically, what happened was they followed me to work, and I saw them from across the store, and they wanted to arrest me, and I ran out the fire exit of the grocery store and escaped them, because I wasn't going to go to jail over my lying wife, who was manipulating these meathead police, who I got love and I have respect for police, but these guys were idiots. And there was multiple times where different women cut my face open and made me bleed because I verbally insulted them. And then I was the one who got handcuffed, and I was the one who, they tried to charge and all that. So, so what happened was I went on unemployment, and I was like mentally lost. Like my wife was jokingly trying to threaten me into committing suicide. Like she would swallow. It's all in the other video. So she would swallow pills and hold knives to her wrists all the time. And for anyone that deals with anyone that threatens suicide or any type of violence like that, where they flip it on you, what I recommend is report them and put them in some type of program before they have a chance. Because the one time that I stopped playing her game, and the one time that I stopped taking her serious, is when she turned the knife on me, and she jumped across the room and cut my arm open and cut my bicep and my deltoid or whatever, and gave me serious damage, which I'm still. It isn't that I'm finally taking the effort to physically recover from it by working out and doing physical therapy and that sort of thing. So with myself, it isn't that she crippled me for life. It's that she did such good physical damage that it took me over 2 years to take the effort to want to work out and recover from the injury, because I got tired of being physically overwhelmed and not having the same strength and agility that I had at one point. So I told myself that, hey, I need to start exercising and get my strength back and get my get my, you know, what I had back from that knife, from that stab wound. And it wasn't the most scary thing that I've ever had happen. It wasn't like the most threatening, life-threatening injury that I've ever had happen to me in my life, but it definitely was a serious injury. And what actually happened was so she was standing there half naked, and we had this we had a Cuisinart multicolored knife set. I'm sure millions of people out there have seen it. It's a knife set. It's all different colors. It's really cool. It's a Cuisinart knife set. So the orange little paring knife, she would hold that to her wrist. She would cut her stomach. She would cut her wrists. She never actually cut herself to the point where she bled seriously, but she would cut herself to the point where it was a flesh wound, and it was like, I have it documented for the court cases, for court's sake. But so what happened was, one morning at like 3 a.m, she was doing this whole suicide act, and and every time she threatened suicide, I got so tired of it that but that was the one thing that I always took serious, because I never wanted that to be on me I didn't want her to actually hurt herself, and I didn't know if she was capable of doing it or not. She would put bags over her head and put belts around her necks and all kinds of weird stuff. So one day I finally just decided, you know what, I'm done playing her game. I'm not gonna jump. I'm not gonna fight with her for the knife. I'm not gonna baby her and all that and give her play. I'm not gonna play her game. So when she ran into the kitchen and she started holding the knives to her wrists, I just sat there like 7 feet away from her. I was at least a good 6 feet away from her, 4 or 5 feet. I was not in lunging distance that I was aware of. And I just told her, Zoe, get over yourself. I know you're not going to do anything, and I'm sorry to give up her name. I just said, I'm not going to play your game. I'm not going to take you serious. I'm not going to, it's done. I'm done with it. I'm done with your stupid suicide games. I'm done with your threatening your own life. And she went psychotic at this point, and she jumped across the kitchen, which was really small. It was like a half island little kitchen, and went around she somehow got in stabbing distance of me, and she stuck this paring knife so deep in my arm. I don't know if she hit the bone. I don't remember, honestly, but the knife wound was bigger than the width of the knife itself. So she stuck it in and she pulled it down, or she went up. And at this point, I mean, I didn't scream or cry like a baby, none of that. I've had brain surgery. I've been in tons of violence before that. But as soon as it happened, I was furious. I was so mad at her. And I was like, Zoe, what are you doing? And so I immediately, but I had never been stabbed before or shot. All my other wounds had been like blunt force wounds and surgeries. Nothing where I started bleeding arterially. So blood started pouring out onto the kitchen floor and onto our belongings in the living room. And she immediately went from her psychotic rage to a loving like shock. She went into more of a shock than me, and she started freaking out like, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? What are we gonna do? What are you gonna do? I just stabbed you. What are we gonna do? And so she freaked out, and she started and I immediately. And I'm not trying to sound macho, and I'm not trying to sound full of myself, because my ex-wife inspired me in so many different ways that I love her so much. I loved her so much, but now, I mean, she's practically nothing to me besides a chapter of my life. But I immediately had to take control of the situation, and I immediately had to control her, because her response to her stabbing me was to call 911 and to freak the hell out. And so what she did was, and I knew how much 911 costs, because I had been put in ambulances before, and I knew that they cost a good $2,000 or $3,000 or whatever. So what happened was I had to control the bleeding, because I had never seen something bleed this much before, to where it just shoots out blood like a pump, where it just goes and you just see blood shooting out. And so I tourniqueted my arm with a shirt or with a towel or something like that, and I got the bleeding to at least be controlled into a shirt, right? And then I knew, and I'm like, dear, stop freaking out, stop panicking, and stop. I got control of her. And I told her, we're not gonna call an ambulance, because if we call an ambulance, it's gonna make things worse. It's gonna cost money, and it wasn't something we had the extra money for, and it wasn't something that we had the time. Like, I had to go to work later that day. And so I told her we're gonna drive to the ER. And she's like, well, what are we gonna tell them? What are we gonna tell them? I don't wanna go to jail. And I'm like, I don't know what you're gonna tell them, but I need to get this stitched up, because it was bigger than a quarter-size stab wound, and it was pouring out blood. And I knew it wasn't, after all the different cuts and scrapes and blood and different stuff I had in the past, I knew that it wasn't just gonna stop bleeding and heal up, because I could see inside my arm and it was shooting out blood when I didn't have stuff on it. So I told her, like, dude, I have to get stitches, right? So she makes up the story that we were doing something in the house with a ladder, and her story was, I fell off the ladder and I fell onto something sharp, which was a complete bogus, nonsensical story. But it was her. She didn't want to go to jail. She didn't want to tell the hospital that she stabbed me out of violent domestic violence. And so we go to the hospital, and the hospital refuses me service because I won't tell them that she stabbed me. I go in there, and there's this nasty old lady and this pretty boy nurse who are both like, and mind you, my ex-wife was a phlebotomist. So she is always around these medical people. She's always frequenting hospitals. She's admitted to me that she's stuck bigger needles than she needs to in people because they were being rude to her, which is so medical practice. Like, to hear someone who's supposed to be a trained medical professional say that they admittedly stuck a bigger, more painful needle in someone just because they were being rude, when I work in food service and I don't even mess with, enemy gang members' food when they come in to buy food from my places of work, and so they want me to tell the truth and say that, obviously my psychotic wife stabbed me or whatever. They want to know the truth, but I won't tell them because I'm loyal to my wife and I don't want her to go to prison or jail. And at the same time, she's finally acting nice to me, and she's finally, being kind to me and helpful, and I'm trying to hold on to that. And I don't want to get the police involved and make her, deal with this situation in that sort of way. So what happens is I go out back to her car because they won't give me medical service, and while I'm out sitting in her car, she's staring at the attractive male security guard, and it just broke. That was one of the most heartbreaking moments I ever had, when this hospital refused to give me service, and also my wife, who had just stabbed me out of her own suicide attempt. I'm trying to get some type of attention, medical attention, funny enough. And she's staring at the black African-American security guard, which I'm not racist in any sort of way, but we had a lot of tension in our relationships because what had happened before, because of me being a white person who didn't care about black people, like in the fact of racism, she tried to make me jealous with the whole like big wiener type of mentality. But like there was multiple times when we first met where she had like performed oral sex on African American men and like never told me about it, and then told me about it later on in my life, like later on in our relationship, which is so dirty and disgusting. But at the same time, like I was screwing other girls while we first met, and I didn't tell her about it, and she thought that I was, only there for her. And so like we both did each other pretty dirty. But the one thing I never did was perform oral sex on another woman and then come kiss her. And there was times where she admitted that she had performed oral sex, and she made it known to me that it was African Americans. So like that was one of her token like jealousy cards, was like to try to make me racially jealous, which I wasn't. But just for the sake of the story, like that's what she tried to do. As like me and her are both white, and that was like one of her strategies, was like to try to make me like racially jealous. So, which I've never had issues, self-image issues of my body or but to be in a hospital parking lot where they won't give me medical service, and I'm a domestic violence stab victim, and I've lost control of my arm pretty much because my bicep and my deltoid is sliced, and it's gushing out blood except for the fact that I have a tourniquet tied on it, and my wife is staring at the big old African American security guard guarding the hospital. And at that point I just felt so broken and so desolate and so alone besides God. And finally the hospital served me, thank God, and they didn't charge me either, praise God, hallelujah. In my medical, the doctor who served me, who stitched my arm, and I got 5 stitches on my arm. When I had brain surgery, I had 20 staples on the side of my head. When I was a kid, my sister pushed me into a piano and cut my lip open right here, and I had 3 stitches there. So whatever the case, I had 5 stitches in my arm from the stab wound. And the doctor who stitched me, she was super hot, and she was blonde, and it was awesome. And I ended up going to work that day, and no one at my job knew unless I told them. So I got to go to work, and my arm was, stitched up, and I covered it up with my sweatshirt. And the only people who knew were like, well, I don't remember, but I ended up telling one of my managers, because I was like, hey, I have to because I had a laborer's job. I had a physical labor job in a grocery store. I wasn't like a computer person or anything. So I had to tell my manager, like, hey, I got stabbed at like 4 a.m. And they knew my wife was a psycho. I came to work with my face busted up. I mean, there had been multiple times where like one of the girls I slept with at work, her and my wife had they allied with each other, and they both wanted to expose every secret I had. So I ended up getting dragged around in my ex-wife's car. She was doing burnouts and donuts in the parking lot of my job. Meanwhile, the coworker who I slept with before I married my wife is yelling all my secrets out of the company parking lot. They were psycho. They were completely psychotic. And looking back on it, what I should have never done was slept with multiple women at the same time and hide it. And also, I should have chosen one of them and gave them 100% rather than gave them all good sex and then choose one of them to marry, which is what I did. And they ended up, because both of them had good attributes. One of them had an apartment. One of them had a condo. She was beautiful, good sex. And and I could have had a place to live and a woman that cooked for me and had kids and a marriage. And the other one who I ended up marrying, she was the love of my life. She was a sweetheart. She bought me clothes. She bought me, but I flopped them both, and they both flopped me because what I was doing was screwing multiple women at the same time. And even though I told them eventually, it didn't cover for the fact that once I did tell them, it caused serious pain. Now, once my ex-wife told me that she had cheated when she first met us, just like I was cheating on her and she had performed oral sex on people and stuff like that, I was still committed to the marriage. Marriage to me is marriage. I'm not going to get married to her, and then when I tell her, because this is what happened. We got married, and I had to tell her, hey, when we first met and I warned you that I was crazy, I was seeing other women. And she's like, oh my God. And she was never the same, and our marriage fell apart. And the funny thing about it, excuse me for belching, was that once I told her that I had seen other women, she told me that she had performed oral sex on multiple people or other people or whatever. So she didn't tell me her secrets until I told her my secrets, but I stayed committed to the relationship and I stayed committed to the marriage while she completely lost it and did not. So to me, marriage and love was something that you work at and you maintain and you keep, not something that when it gets a little tough, you just quit. But for her, as soon as, and I don't know if she still loves me today or if she wished she would have tried to make it work or what, but like, I wonder that too. Like if deep down, like cause she's seriously mentally ill. She still to this day, like denies the fact that she stabbed me and that like it was her fault. Or she thinks it was her defending herself when like I have videos of her with the knife to her wrist. She's completely mentally ill and delusional. But like I wonder if in her deepest like innermost feelings, if she wishes that we would have worked out or wishes that she would have stayed together with me. I don't know. But I still love, like, for who she was, I still love her, and how she looks, I still love her. But for what she is and what she's done and how she acts and thinks today, I don't love her anymore because she's completely insane and self-destructive and I just cannot tolerate it in any sort of form or besides babysitting her. Like I could easily live with her or monitor her or take care of her, but in terms of having her as a romantic significant other is completely insane and just she basically, no one cared that I was, it came to the point where like she had almost killed me with a knife and no one cared. And I was being charged by the Sacramento court systems with domestic violence. And my family didn't care, and my brother and sister didn't care, my work didn't care. And I didn't expect other people to care, but like it does something to you mentally to like have someone beat the living crap out of you for 2 years and eventually almost kill you, and then no one cares. Like no one, like everyone is just like, well, you should have left her. Like it seriously isolates you mentally. So let's fast forward. So she ends up with her witchcraft circles getting me thrown into jail for the day. And instead of bailing me out and helping me, she goes to the bar with her friend. And with her friend who I absolutely despise and I absolutely hate. And at that point, it's just all bets are off. The marriage is over. She in the Bible, the verses that I lived off of with my ex-wife was, I believe they come from Hebrews, and basically what they say is that if a non-believer and a believer are married, then the believer has to wait for the non-believer to either cheat or to leave the relationship. And the reason for this is because if in case anyone has any children or in case there is any children, then it's to protect the children. It's so the person who's a believer can stay and be protective of the children and make sure that the children are basically taken to God. And the crazy part about that scripture is that I believe it's written by Paul, and so it isn't out of the teaching of Jesus Christ necessarily, because I believe Jesus is questioned multiple times about divorce, and also divorces in the Old Testament. So if I would have been more biblically knowledgeable and Christian and more, I may have taken that may have taken a completely different turn. But for the time being, I was seeking God, and those were the scriptures that I found about marriage. And in a place where I had lost my family, I had lost my wife. She was completely insane. And I couldn't pay rent on my own. I couldn't. It was at the point where all I had was God, and my perception of God and Jesus Christ, and of course my relationship with God and Jesus Christ. Hallelujah, praise God. And also, the Bible. That's all that I had. I didn't have a counselor that I could trust. She had turned everyone against me. So, and not to mention, the whole point of this video, Hell's Angels marriage counseling, I don't consider myself a Hell's Angel in any sort of the way. It's just because I grew up in Sacramento and Pasadena, and my parents are from San Bernardino in Southern California, and just the fact that she grew up in the Hell's Angels prostitution rings, and just how many people are affiliated with the Hell's Angels out there, whether they drive pickup trucks, construction workers, ex-military, whether they're actual Hell's Angels out in the sticks, like my first video with moonshine and white lightning, and or if they're just affiliates who are beggars on the street, or truck drivers, whether they're witches, Christians, Hell's Angels, black witches, white witches, the Hell's Angels is a huge organization spiritually. I'm not saying that they're a huge organization of vests and patch wearers, because honestly, I don't really know any of them except for the ones that I got swept up with in Redding, California. Those guys were definitely Hell's Angels without a doubt, by any point of the mean. And the ones in this story I think are too, but the rest of the organization, the spiritual organization of Hell's Angels, is a huge organization. Like I said, everywhere from motorcycle vest wearing patches to prostitution to beggars to truck drivers to ex-military to police to CHP. It's huge. It's like if you were to ask California, how many people in California are Christians, it would almost be the same as the amount of people in Nevada, in Las Vegas, and California that would consider themselves part of the Hell's Angels, to me, in my mind. In a joking way. I don't really know if that's true, because there may be more Christians, and it's not, and I don't mean anything like the statement of the guy who John Lennon, when he said they're more popular than Jesus, and he ended up getting murdered, I think due to his wife Yoko Ono, but I think what I'm saying is that's really how many are out there in Las Vegas, in California, affiliated with that group. So we divorce, spiritually, by religion, not by the state of California, and I just completely lose my whole sanity, because I never had any dealings with witchcraft at all. And then I get fully thrown into this circle of witchcraft with my ex-wife, and I lose my job, and I get unemployment. And what I end up doing is driving up and down California for a good year while I was on unemployment, basically trying to regain my sanity and staying in Motel 6s month to month, and going out to Las Vegas a couple times here and there. And so eventually I landed in Woodland, California, which is west of Sacramento, and jokingly, the witches of Woodland. Shout out, love to Woodland. They helped me get a better alternator for my car. They have 666 posted up at different stores, different stuff in their community. It's no confusion that witchcraft is something that exists in their community. And they helped me get a nicer alternator for my car than I originally paid for. and they also helped me get my car registered with extra tags one time. No, just like shout out, much love. I hope, you know, whatever it is, I don't know if they would want God to bless them or whatever. I don't know, but they helped me and I love them. But so I ended up going out there because they had a cheaper Motel 6. And the first thing that was crazy there was that the Motel 6 on Google, they had pictures from like 10 years ago or 15 years ago of the parking lot of their Motel 6. And in the parking lot of their Motel 6 was a white Ford Thunderbird, which is the same frame as my white Lincoln Mark 8, and it was in like the exact same place that I parked, and like it was like it's a joke that I have where I always compare the two cars as being the same frame, and it was so like you wake up at the Motel 6, and the Motel 6s were heavily occupied because of COVID, and you see my unique white Mark 8, and Mark 8s are not very common. So you see a white Mark 8 parked in a Motel 6 parking lot, you're going to be like, oh, there's a white Mark 8 right there. It's going to catch your attention if you know cars or if you know me. And then you go on Google, and like 10 years or 15 years back, when these cars actually came out, you see a picture of their parking lot from that far away in time with a white Thunderbird in almost the exact same spot as my car. And it was so weird and cool. That was the first thing that happened. So I'm chilling there, drinking in the Motel 6, and the battery in my car dies, and I have to walk to Walmart and buy a new battery. And so I go to Walmart and I buy a new battery, and I carry it by hand, which is like a half mile back to the Motel 6, and I realize I have no wrenches. So I go to bed, I drink my vodka, and I go to bed, I pass out, whatever. And I wake up the next morning, and I go out to my car to change my battery or figure out how I'm going to change my battery. And this white guy comes over to me and starts talking to me. And a couple days before that, there was a different guy, some Hispanic guy, or I don't know what he was, but he wasn't white. And he was really, I'm not racist, but people on the street are almost always suspicious to me. Like drug users on the street are almost always suspicious to me. So, and this guy was extremely suspicious. And he had asked me a couple days before, the original person, not the guy who came up to me this day, if he could drive my car for a little bit. He was like, hey man, can I drive your car for a little bit? Or like, can we go driving in your car? I'm like, no, dude, no. What are you talking about? So a couple days later, when I go out to my car to change my battery, another guy walks up to me. Now, mind you, this guy's white and tattooed and kind of like a stocky character, right? And it wasn't that, but just his tone of voice, I trusted him. So he comes up to me and he goes, hey, cool, hey, can we cruise in your car? Like, can I help you fix your battery? And can we cruise in your car for a little bit? And I'm like, and okay, this is the part. If you've never dealt with the Hells Angels and you've never been on the streets and you don't need help, I recommend that you say no. Guard your money, guard your resources, and guard your life. If you're alone and you don't need help, just politely and lovingly say no. Now, me, I had the bad habit of making new friends in the street, and I dealt with Hells Angels before, and I didn't know these guys were Hells Angels, but for some reason that morning, whether it was a guilt trip or manipulation or whatever, I bit into it. And like I said, if you want to become affiliated with the Hells Angels, then if something like that happens to you and it doesn't sound like they're going to murder you or kill you, then tell them, yeah, let's hang out. Let's work, because that's usually how it works. Just like the first video, the guy asked me if I could give him gas money, and then by the time that we got to the place he was going to give me an ounce of marijuana. So it was like I was helping him and he was helping me, and then he eventually abandoned me and ditched me and never gave, and I didn't get what my side of the bargain, and that's usually how it goes with street angels, as I call them. So what happened here is the guy goes, hey, well, can I help you fix your blah, 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 change your battery and da-da. And it was something I didn't need. Just like the first time, I didn't need the marijuana, but I wanted it. And this time, I don't know what it was. It was probably because I was half drunk that it actually happened. So, like, but not actually drunk. I was drunk from the night before. I was still wet from the night before, but I was probably blowing a 0.0 because I wasn't like legally intoxicated or anything like that, but I was drinking so heavy at the time that it was definitely, I was still inebriated to some degree. So I accepted this guy's help, and it turns out he's got a girl with him. So the next strange thing that happened is we don't have any wrenches, but I have one tool that's made for guitars, and funny enough, this tool for my guitars, it has one wrench on it for the truss rod on guitars, and it fits the battery terminal on my car. So that is the second thing that was extremely random and miraculous, praise God, is that the one wrench that we had, it worked with my car. It changed the battery on my car, and it was awesome. And we got my new battery in. So at this point, I've dealt with these type of situations with people on the street before. They usually want something from you. So I meet these people, and it's like I said, the guy was older than me. He had the USMC tattoo on his hand. He was very tattooed, and his girl was a beautiful girl. And they were, I don't remember if they did meth in front of me. I'm pretty sure they shot up meth in front of me with, if I remember correctly, they did actual shooting up with the needle in front of me. They were into harder drugs. They were doing more illegal hard drugs than I was drinking alcohol. Alcohol is obviously dangerous and deadly drug, but they were doing like heroin or meth or whatever. I was just smoking weed and drinking alcohol. So we take my car and start driving around Woodland in Sacramento in Roseville, California. And they start telling me about their life, about his life story. I never really found out much about her. I'm pretty sure that they were undercover police. And it was during COVID, so times were extremely weird and crazy in this nation. And I'm pretty sure they were just going around in their Chrysler 300C and just basically doing drugs and living on the streets and trying to, doing undercover work. Because he was and I believe 100% of his story, because they showed me pictures and everything. And he had the tattoos, and they were very credible people. They weren't like a crackhead who like just like comes up and like, yo, my uncle owns Ford and I'm from Missouri and let's smoke meth. No. And they're all like scabby and skinny and begging for money. No, they had a car, they had money, and like, I'm pretty sure that they were undercover police, because at one point she was undercover police, because she kept putting the idea into me that the police are my friend. And I don't mind that, because that brought me at peace with that brought me to peace with the grudges and the evil that I had with the police at the time. And he was an ex, and this is, if you don't want to believe his story, that's okay, but I do, and he showed me pictures of him. And like I said, I think that my guess is that she was a police, and because he was an ex-prison guard. And I'm pretty sure that I'm pretty sure she was a police, some type of law enforcement. And I'm pretty sure, so they were like married, he was a prison guard. And his story was that he was originally a Marine, and he had Marine Corps tattoos. So I don't know why anyone in their right mind would get Marine Corps tattoos who wasn't a Marine. You'd have to be a serious faker. And they also showed me pictures of them when they weren't using drugs, and they were like very clearly a military law enforcement standing in that type of pose, like together family. And he at one point had gone undercover. He was originally a prison guard after the Marine Corps, I believe. And then he had gone undercover he told me that he went into the prison as an inmate to go undercover, working with the Mexican mafia, smuggling in drugs into the Folsom Prison. And I believe that 100% because I was in Wasco State Prison in California, and I lived with the MA, or what was the modern day MA, the Mexican mafia, the Southern Mexicans, and I had lived around Folsom Prison my whole life. And the pictures he showed me, in the way that he carried himself, in the way that she acted, they weren't just like two crystal meth heads on the street. I think that he was a Marine who became a prison guard, and she was some type of law enforcement or some type of I think she and they were doing some type of undercover work during COVID, because I encountered all throughout my time going up and down California on unemployment during COVID. I encountered so many different type of people who, everywhere from gangbangers to car thieves to youngsters who were caught up in gangs and were like 14 and 15 years old using drugs and meth, to people who were handicapped, in wheelchairs, and to people who were clearly undercover, even to the point where like these kids were getting free phones from the undercover workers, because the undercover law enforcement in the area, this is my perception, in my opinion, were more concerned with these kids at least living some type of controllable life, knowing that they were the ones giving these kids drugs and whatever. Where, I mean, like, if you go to Southern California, and I'm not saying like, oh, LA, like the East Los or like South Los Angeles, I'm saying like all Bakersfield, 661, I forgot the freaking name of the county, but Wasco, all these areas where there's so many white and Mexican people living together. And that's like what the Mexican mafia is. Okay, you could say the Mexican mafia is the actual shot callers on the tier of the CDCR. Okay, well, I lived with them, I ate with them, I did business, I ran a bag of alcohol. Here's my version of the Mexican mafia in the prison system. Praise God, hallelujah. On Sunday, which is drinking day for the Southsiders, I got to run a bag of wine to the shot caller's cell, and the Mexican prison guard watched me do it, and he said absolutely nothing. And I mean, I'm not going to say other stuff, but like, that's my version of the Mexican mafia to its core, is Mexican guards allowing the Southsiders to do stuff because they're Mexican. That is a Mexican mafia. Now, the actual MA, as it was during the 60s and the 70s or whatever, no, I didn't meet Boxer. I didn't meet the original founding members of the Mexican mafia. But what it was during 2014, 15, and 16, as, Southsiders, what it is then, when I was there in prison, is I was a white boy, but I made it very clear to them that my family and my friends on the street, not my immediate family, not my white immediate blood family, they're not Southerners, but all my immediate friends and what I considered family on the street were Southsiders, and I made it clear to them that that's how I paid tax to them and showed them that's what I believed in and that's what I affiliated with, and what it basically was when I was there was, I'm not going to speak for the whites, but for the Southerners, from my perspective as a white boy, you showed up, you had a neighborhood, you would tell them your neighborhood, whether it was Florence 13 or Blythe or Harpies or and that's Harpys, Harpys, or Solo, or FX Troop, or all these different southern neighborhoods from LA and all over, San Luis Obispo neighborhoods. And then you check in, and then if there's a problem from your neighborhood, then you have to handle it. If someone comes from your neighborhood and they have dirty paperwork or they're causing problems, then it's your car, it's your Vario, you have to handle it. You guys have to remove that person from the yard. And I didn't get much deeper than that. But like I said, I got to run alcohol for him and pay tax and interact and hang out and get my hair cut and almost get some tattoos and stuff like that. And then you get out on the streets and I meet this guy who, him and his wife, pick me up in a Motel 6 parking lot, or him and his girl, and we're cruising around Sacramento, and he starts telling me stories how he was a prison, how he was originally a Marine, and how he ended up being a prison guard, and he went undercover as an inmate and running drugs for the MA in this Folsom prison. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty freaking believable, and that sounds accurate. So I'm hanging out with these two people, and I start talking trash about the Hells Angels, because we start telling each other stories about different crazy stuff that's happened in the streets and with different drug situations and different stuff like that. And these people, and they basically, and I start telling them how the Hells Angels screwed me over, and how the Hells Angels, ripped me off and abandoned me and stuff like that. And they get super defensive and I had to me, at that point in my life, the Hells Angels were just a motorcycle gang that I had dealt with in Redding, California, that owed me an ounce of weed and that never gave me a ride home. I didn't know how they started. I didn't know that they began as like an ex-military group. I didn't know that they were named after military bombers from World War I and II. I didn't know, and I didn't care. I didn't know that my parents were from the area they were supposedly started in. I didn't know how deep and how wide of an organization they were. Like I said, I grew up idolizing Southerners as the biggest gang in the world, which they kind of are, in my opinion. But even that, if you look further into it, they're just a military offshoot anyways. And the whole thing, it doesn't really matter. But at the time, I didn't care about the Hells Angels, nor did I have any understanding of them. All I remembered was that they pissed me off and that they abandoned me. And because the guys I dealt with during the first story that I told were Hells Angels, and clearly proud of this. And they made me wear red clothes and made me, tried to, initiate me into their gang and stuff like that. And even one time in jail in Sacramento, when I was in the same jail as Mozzie, at the branch, RCCC in Sacramento. The Norteños didn't know that I was a Southsider, because there's not really a high Southsider population in Sacramento. Now, if I would have told the police that I was a Southerner, I would have got put with the one or two other Southsiders and lived a happy, protected life. But I didn't want my gun charges to be upgraded to gang affiliation. It's called, I forgot what it's called, but basically you get double or triple the time because of gang affiliation. So I didn't tell the police that I was a Southsider, because I didn't want my gun charges and my charges that I was facing to be upgraded to gang, because they have these bogus gang laws where it's like, if you get in trouble with a bullet, if you get caught with a bullet or a gun and you tell them that you have gang affiliation, you automatically get 3 or 4 more years. It's stupid and it's nonsense. And I wasn't gonna incriminate myself with the police, or as E40 put, I'm not gonna snitch on myself. So they stuck me in the heart of the blood and the Norteño jail in Sacramento. And there was one night where I got freaking green lighted because of my Southside tattoos, and the whole jail put my wing of the jail, it was 2 10-man cells, and the whole rest of the wing, they put a hit out on me, and they wanted to, the Norteños, And I'm not going to talk trash about the Norteños because I'm at peace with them and I love them. And what I learned was Southerners or Norteños alike, it's all the same. Blood, Crip, white boy, Norteño, Sereno. What I learned was it isn't about the color that you wear or who you think you are. What matters is how you how you carry yourself and how you treat other people and what you bring to the table. When it comes to prison and gangs and all that kind of craziness, what you learn, it doesn't matter who's the black shot caller, who's the white shot caller, I wasn't very around many Norteño shot callers except when I went to a northern prison. And even those guys, we got along because there was yards where they were existing together respectfully. And what I learned was, and I would recommend another person to learn, is that it isn't about what color or what gang you affiliate with. It's about what you bring to the table and if you keep your hands on the table. And when I say if you keep your hands on the table, it means like whether or not you steal and lie. And that's how you really, because you meet white people, black people, Mexican people, and the worst type of people you deal with are the ones that steal and lie. So I'm riding around with these people who pick me up and they're helping me repair my car. But I did not need help, and I did not need help, and I didn't need help, and I didn't necessarily and I could have done it myself. But I have to use the bathroom so bad right now that I'm gonna have to pause this and make a part 2. So I will be right back.